Are we ready to go? Angela, let's begin with a roll call, if you would, please.
Connie Palmer.
Here.
Peter Brackman.
Here.
Judy Chapa.
Here.
Andrew Pullis.
Here.
Ann Curry.
Here.
Alan Ford.
Here.
Susan Gary. Joe Gagne.
Here.
Ross Carey.
Here.
Chair Lillis.
Here.
Will Costigan.
Here.
Vice Chair Ralph.
Here.
President Schill.
Here.
Mary Wilcox.
Here.
Kurt Wilcox.
Here.
We are all in attendance, and we obviously have a quorum. Let's begin with approval or non-approval, I suppose, of the June 2016 minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments or observations? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We'll begin with the public comment section, and according to my list, 3 people have signed up to comment. And as I ask you to come forward, please come up to the microphone so we can all hear well. And we will start with, well, just doing the order in which people signed up. David Eagle. Please come forward, David, and have a seat. Absolutely, please.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure if you've all had a chance to see all the materials I've furnished. They were quite recent because I was starting my report from...
Let me just add, I think all the trustees did get it.
Did you get both sets, both documents?
I think we got both, yes.
Okay, good. Okay, well, I'll just launch right in then. I believe that to remove the name of Professor Dunn from the building at this time prevents a great risk to the academic reputation of the University of Oregon to the point that we may be made to look ridiculous. President Schill and our entire community's understanding of Professor Dunn is based on the report of 3 historians. Upon examination, without question, it is a deeply flawed document. The historians were asked to report on Frederick Dunn, and they seemed to do little beyond provide superficial biographical information. Apparently, they were erroneously convinced by an earlier historian named Toy that Professor Dunn had been openly in charge of the Eugene chapter of the Klan as it harassed Catholics and publicly attacked the University of Oregon by claiming that most of the faculty and students were Catholics and that the university was controlled by secret Jesuit priests. They acknowledged that Dunn loved the university. If this apparent contradiction weren't enough to raise red flags, I would like to raise some more. My examination of the record hasn't turned up any evidence that Dunn was leading the Klan during this period, and there should have been such evidence if he had been. Dunn does show up in various articles, but only for mundane topics. He dies in 1937, and according to documents in the Lane County History Museum, it was said of him, everybody liked him. That's not consistent with him having openly led a racist, religiously bigoted organization that harassed Catholics in the University of Oregon. The leading primary contemporary source on the Oregon Klan in the 1920s is newspaperman Harry Crane. In his series, he specifically described how in Eugene, many of the initial individuals who signed up for the Klan, which in reality was a financially motivated collection of con artists operating out of Georgia, quickly dropped out after learning that the Klan was not the patriotic, honorable, law-abiding supporter of honest law enforcement that they had represented themselves to be. Crane explained how leading citizens such as Professor Dunn were targeted for initial membership so as to use their prestige to advance the Klan's own fraudulent financial schemes. Professor Dunn's proven relationship with the Klan is only tied to this initial period, only this. It appears that Professor Dunn was actually merely a victim of some swindlers called the KKK. The historian's report failed to examine the meaning of Dunn's involvement with the Methodist Episcopal Church and the YMCA, the church of which Dunn's father had been a founding member in Eugene, and Dunn was very active in, had attacked the institution of slavery and pushed for the establishment of the Freedmen's Bureau to help the freed slaves. In Dunn's time, it was among the most racially integrated churches in America, both in terms of membership and clergy. Its first core principle called for the respect for the individual, whatever their station in life. In 1912, in a sermon before his church reported in the Morning Register, in full, by the way, Professor Dunn decried the fact that Christians had been fighting each other for 2,000 years, breaking into sections divided by creeds and dogmas. His ecumenical nature is further revealed in that he states that he, a Gentile, is practicing a Jewish religion that has accepted Gentiles. The YMCA, a Protestant organization of which Dunn was the faculty sponsor on campus, was famous for its warm welcome of Catholics and Jews. The campus hut the Y operated before the Herb Student Union was built was open to all students. The Campus Y group helped all students in many ways, including greeting them as they arrived at the train station, providing information including a little collection of song and sports schedules. The real Professor Dunn of history would have met a Catholic or black student at the train station, not in the angry robes of a Klansman, but with the same encouraging and welcoming face showed to all students. He might well have treated a black student differently than other students in one respect, though. As someone who held a deep reverence for Abraham Lincoln, a close family friend of his ancestors, including his father knew him, in this respect, he might have treated that black student different. He might have said to them, if you're looking for a church to attend, you'll feel welcome in mine. Let's do some more study. We may even be able to raise Professor Dunn's grade from an F to an A. That's it.
Thank you.
Anything?
Okay, thanks very much, David.
Thank you.
Next on the list is Natalie Fisher. Natalie, please come forward and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Natalie Fisher, and I'm the External Vice President of the ASUO. Sorry, I'm a little nervous, but so I'm here today to discuss the same topic and to voice my support on behalf of the students at this university that to dename actually both Dunn and D.D. Hall. So I definitely agree that, especially with the email that President Schill recently sent out, that it is incredibly important to remember the history and the people that helped found our university, but I think there is a difference between remembering these people and honoring them for what they did. The historians are obviously professionals that went ahead and I'm sure did a very thorough job in researching these two men on their involvement in Lane County and with the university as well. And obviously it's a very difficult argument. And it's a very difficult situation, but I very much believe that if the main argument is that at this time, this is how everyone thought, then I think the response needs to be, we have more building names to look at and figure out, you know, how exactly to make this campus feel as inclusive as possible. If there are students on this campus that feel unsafe because of names on buildings, I think that that is a very small thing that the board can do to go ahead and make these students feel safe on this campus, feel included, and feel like they are wanted here, to feel like people care that they're here. And I think that is such an important thing, especially for marginalized communities, students of color, women on this campus that, you know, these universities haven't always been welcoming to them, haven't always wanted them here, and that has been, you know, a clear, obvious thing, especially, you know, in regards to the names of these buildings, in regards to just looking back at our past, especially Oregon's very racist past. I mean, I love the University of Oregon. I've loved it since I was a toddler wearing those little Oregon cheerleading outfits. It's always been the school that I've wanted to come to, and I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to be representing the students, and I love what I do. And I think, you know, I think that this is something that people have voiced their opinion on, and I think it's incredibly important to listen and to hear what the students are saying, and that is why I'm so happy to be here today to talk with you all about this. And I think, too, it's important to think about, I think if this meeting was held more closer to school or more during school, there would be a lot of students here voicing their opinion. I know a lot of people, I guess a record amount of people responded to the survey to go ahead and state whether or not they felt that these names should be changed. And I know that there would be a large student presence here today, and I'm sorry about that, but I'm glad that Quinn and I could both be here to, you know, voice our voice on behalf of the students. And so if anything comes out of this meeting today, I do hope that we can dename Dunn and D.D. Hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie, and congratulations on your new role as a student leader. The next speaker is Quinn Haga, and Quinn is the new president of the student organization, and welcome.
Everyone. So yes, as Chuck said, my name is Quinn Haga. I'm the new ASUO president. I've had the pleasure of meeting some of you, but I'm definitely looking forward to getting to know you all better throughout this year. So I'm here as well today to voice my support for the denaming of Dunn Hall. On August 10th, 2016, so just a few days ago, Larnell Bruce, who's 19 years old, was brutally murdered by two white supremacists in Gresham, Oregon. As the report from the historians touched on, the state of Oregon has a very ugly racist history that is deeply ingrained in many of our policies and laws. Unfortunately, as this horrible tragedy illustrates, these sentiments are still very alive and well in many parts of the state. I urge the board to approve the recommendation by President Schill to rename Dunn Hall, which, as you of course know, was named after a white supremacist leader of the Ku Klux Klan, an organization that has dedicated its existence to spreading toxic white supremacy through brutal, violent measures. If the board chooses to vote this recommendation down, I see that as a direct contradiction to upholding one of our university's core values, which is to foster equity and inclusion in a welcoming, safe, and respectful community. It's impossible to claim that we're committed to this while still honoring an individual who spent a good portion of their life inflicting terror on the people of Jackson County, particularly on the African American and Catholic communities. While I completely support the decision to rename Dunn Hall, I'm hopeful that in the fall, our campus community will also choose to rename Dee Hall, which honors an individual who ran as a pro-slavery delegate and actively promoted the exclusion of blacks and Chinese from the Oregon Constitution, and also believed that only pure white men should vote. Additionally, I believe that the university should even go a step further and potentially do an investigation similar to the ones done on Dee and Dunn Hall to evaluate all the buildings on campus and who they are named after. It's our responsibility to ensure that students on this campus feel safe and that they are attending a university that promotes equity and inclusion in all aspects of life. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the people that have signed up for public comment. So I think we will move on with the agenda now. Thank you, all three of you, for taking time. The first item on the on the agenda is to hear from President Schill on his recommendation relative to Dunn Hall, which will require action. You've all received the information that the President has produced and will discuss. I would like to say before Mike starts, this is, today, he is dealing only with Dunn Hall. And he has said, and I think for good reason, that he'd like to delay dealing with Dealey until later, in particular when the students have returned to campus. So if it's possible to separate our discussion and conversation Dunn from Dealey today, Neely, I'm sorry, it would be helpful, I think. Okay. Dee, yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Michael.
So, as many of you know, I'm not going to, out of sympathy for you, I'm not going to read my whole letter, which reflected the fact that I used to write a lot. This all, I'm just going to summarize some of the major points. This process, at least under my tenure as president, began with November, when our group of students under the name of the Black Student Task Force held a protest here after the Ferguson event and also after the Missouri protests. And essentially, we invited them in that day, and we started talking to them, and we really have had a very good dialogue with the Black Student Task Force. We encouraged them to provide us with a list of what they were requesting. They ultimately gave us a list of 13 demands, and in those 13 demands was one that we renamed what they called the KKK buildings on campus, starting with Dee Hall. And so ultimately we understood that to be Dunn Hall and Dee Hall. So we started discussing and thinking about what the appropriate way for handling this was. In the good traditions of universities, I assembled a faculty, student, administrator committee, which looked at, and I asked them to give me their ideas about what criteria they would suggest that I use in making a recommendation with respect to taking a name off of a building. We also made a determination that the board had the power to name and therefore also had the power to dename. I did not. And instead, what I could do is make the recommendation to the board, and that you all would have the ability to vote yea or nay on that. So a committee chaired by Sharice Cheney gave me a list of criteria. I then read those criteria, put them into my own words, and what I did was I, through a number of conversations with historians on campus and off, what we did is we brought together a panel of 3 historians, a former professor here, Quintard Taylor, Marcia Weisiger, who is a professor here, and David Taylor, who is a professor, David Johnson at Portland State. They wrote a report which was, all of you have and no doubt have read, 34 pages. We posted it to my website and encouraged people to make comments on that website. And we were really sort of very pleased when we saw the quantity of comments and the thoughtfulness of the comments. We received close to 1,000 as of the date that we initially closed down the comments, which was August 24th. And those comments were really quite interesting. And, you know, I've always taken the position this is not going to be a vote of the comments, but I still think it's interesting to get the wisdom from the comments. The way the comments ran was essentially it was the students, faculty, community folks, administrators. People felt very strongly that Dunn Hall should be denamed, and they were pretty split on D.D. Hall. Roughly about half the people would dename D.D. Hall in that set of comments. And now we didn't have boxes for people to check off, so it's just reading through the comments and trying to understand them. We're not talking about D.D. Hall today. We're talking about Dunn Hall. So then what I set out to do is write the letter that you all received with my recommendation. I think the most important part of my letter, to me at least, is thinking through what are the principles that we should be using as we go forward with this process. And, you know, I think we start with certain very important principles that define us as a community. And I'm not going to read everything here, but obviously bigotry and racism have no place on our campus, that all students at the University of Oregon, all races, genders, ethnicities, religion, abilities, they should all feel included. They're all part of our university, and that's an important part of who we are, and it's important for our future. Third criterion, something else that I think is important, is it's very dangerous to obscure history. We learn from history. Taking people's names off buildings is something that we should do very, very carefully. And when we do it, we need to make sure that we in some way retain that history for the future. The mistakes of the past will only get revisited if we don't hold on to that history. I also think that denaming a building has a strong symbolic impact, but again, this is my view. Symbols are less important than actions, and I think that there's a number of things that we're doing on campus with respect to the 12 other demands of the Black Student Task Force, which I'll describe in my president's report, which ultimately, to me, in my value system are much more important than the symbol of taking a name off or leaving a name on. It's what we do in the present that is important. And then the last principle is basically, and it derives from some of these principles, is that there should be a presumption against denaming buildings. Number one, when you take someone's name off a building, in contrast to when you put someone's name on a building, it actually is a real harm to their reputation. So you have to be careful about that. And the person normally is no longer with us, so their person is not there to defend themselves. Time's gone by, information is less good. We don't, we're not in the moment. We also don't have the same lens and the same, we aren't living the life that person led. And we don't fully understand and maybe it's inappropriate to judge the person based upon the mores of today as opposed to those that the person lived in. And, lastly, there is the real danger of, as I said, of taking someone's name off a building may also take off some of our history and hide some of our history. So I think that the way I phrase it is that when one denames a building, it should be reserved for egregious cases, and there should generally be a presumption against. As I read the historian's report, I found that for me and for, I believe, in the best interests of the school, having a building named after Dunn would be one of those instances. It would be, this is one of those egregious circumstances. Dunn was the exalted Cyclops of the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan, as all of us understand, was one of the most notorious organizations in American history, and had a very ugly role in American history, both with respect to lynchings, murders, terrorism, with regard to African Americans, but not just African Americans, with regard to Jews, with regard to Catholics. And it's in my view that it would be inconsistent with our ideals as a school to have a building named after the exalted Cyclops of the Ku Klux Klan. So for those reasons, I'm recommending to the board that you vote to take off the name of Dunn from Dunn Hall. And then if you should decide to do that, I'll be coming back later with a recommendation for a new name. And I propose, and we should certainly have a conversation about that if you'd like today, what the process might be for coming up with that new name. My sense is that what we should do is name Dunn Hall or rename Dunn Hall if you should decide to vote in favor of my recommendation. Name that building for someone who does further our ideals of inclusion, does further our commitment to diversity, and that we go about the process of determining that name through an inclusionary process on campus that will hopefully be both healing and educational. And I guess the last thing I'll say on this is, I just want to, again, we're beginning the school year, so the students aren't here, but I hope that they'll hear through Quinn and through other folks just how grateful I am that the students of the Black Student Task Force put this on our agenda, because I think it's been a really good learning opportunity. I'm not proud of the fact that we have this in our past, but I am proud of the fact that we're approaching this in a way that I think befits a great research university, which is based upon facts, based upon understanding, based upon a collegial discussion of history. And that's what we do best, right? We're a learned institution. We do best at dialogue and logic and of research, and I'm very pleased with that so far.
listened to lots of views, complicated decision. So I think you deserve recognition for the process itself, which was terrific. And I think the way for us to proceed here is we should ask, there is the resolution of denaming Dunn and temporarily naming it Cedars until a renaming process is undertaken. I think procedurally what we should do is ask if there is a motion to adopt this resolution and a second, and then we'll engage in conversation and question. And so is there a motion to
Second.
And there's a second. Okay. Any comments or questions relative to this motion?
I would simply say I concur that there was a lot of thoughtfulness as we read through the documents that you presented to us.
Can you use the microphone?
How you went through, got to this point in the decision making. And one of the things that you was really interesting was to look at the criteria and to see how the historians answered each one of the criteria that was set. I guess, and when you look at the criteria and you look at how the historians saw the story of Professor Dunn and his participation in the KKK, you could see you could very easily see how you'd come to this conclusion. There's also a document that that shows us that he was, as you say, an exalted Cyclops. But I think the question I have is about the criteria. How did you? It seems to me very thoughtful criteria. I think you sort of touched on how you came to it. It must have been very difficult to figure out that criteria, given that we don't want to judge someone against the times that they lived in.
So what I did was I created this committee. The committee came up with a set of criteria. I then went through that and talked to a number of people and came up with my own way of phrasing. What I looked at was what were they concerned about, and then I put them into words that I thought would be answerable through a look at the historical record. What I wanted to be sure about was I didn't want the decision. In fact, we very specifically told the historians that we didn't want a recommendation. What we wanted them to do was just deal with what historians typically deal with. Tell me the history. And then I will make the judgment based upon a set of principles, whether there should be a denaming or not, and make the recommendation to you all. But I thought it was important to get out what the facts were, and so I gave them a set of questions that I wanted them to look at, and I think they did. And if you read the historian's report, I think you got the feeling that they basically undone. They were just so, I think that the facts were so clear undone, they couldn't help but make a recommendation. And it shows up in the language of their report. But overall, I think that they did just a fabulous job. And I've been hearing them talk about how excited they were to have done this. And, they weren't jumping at the opportunity to do this. We had to really ask them to do it because it was they spent 2 months of the summer going to, historical records, using archives to dig up this information.
I'd like to also commend you on the process that we followed thus far, not only in the report that we received from the historians, which was they did an excellent job putting together a lot of details, and you can tell there was a lot of thought put into it. I'd also like to commend you on postponing the vote on Dee Hall until no decision hasn't been made at this point, so I think it does make a lot of sense. In preparation for that, and then just speaking a little bit to Dunn, I want all of us to think about some of the work that you shared and expressed today. And I think the biggest one is an egregious act. And to be a member of the KKK during that time period, that is egregious. This was a group that was formed to really promote hatred throughout society. Slavery, that was the most egregious act, I think, in the history of the United States and the history of the world. You're talking about people that were enslaved for over 245 years, almost 300 years. The average life expectancy of a slave was 22 years. So you're talking about 11 generations of African Americans that were born as slaves. That is the most egregious act that we have seen in the United States and will ever hopefully see in the United States. So as we prepare to make the decision on Dee, I just want us to all remember that this was a person that ran on a pro-slavery during a time when in the state of Oregon, that was the minority. 80% of the people in Oregon were against slavery. So in my mind, that was an egregious act. And I think as a university, as we've shown in the decision that we make with Dunn, I think we need to continue to show our courage and continue to set the example for all universities across the United States. I know this does open up a box. We talk about looking at the naming of other buildings, and this can become an ongoing conversation, but it's a conversation that needs to be had. It's a conversation that's being had throughout the United States, and it's a conversation that if we don't have, I don't think we will be able to learn from history. I understand that changing the name of a building can, in some people's mind, say that we're changing the history. I agree with what Amy said earlier. I don't believe that we're changing history. I think we're no longer honoring people that did egregious actions throughout the course of history. So if we want to put a little snippet about them in the building, I'm fine. But to have a building named after a person honoring that individual that was pro-slavery or a member of the KKK, I don't think that's the kind of university that we are. And I'm very confident that we're going to have the courage to make the right decision. So, again, I commend you on the process that we've come to thus far, and I wholeheartedly support renaming Dunn. And if we get to the point of renaming Dee, I will wholeheartedly support that as well. Thank you.
Comments or?
I just really want to appreciate, make sure that the Black Student Union, Black Student Task Force knows how much we appreciate their bringing this to our attention, because I, for one, did not know about either Dunn or Dee before they did. So I just want to express my appreciation. It is a huge, huge issue, and again, I applaud all of the work that has been done on it and want to express my appreciation.
Any other comments or observations? So the resolution before us denames Dunn, temporarily names Cedars, replaces with Cedars, takes no action on Dee. There is the resolution as a motion and a second. So I think we'll take a roll call vote to see if we're supportive of this. So can we do that, Angela?
We can. We'll start at the beginning this time.
And the resolution's on page 12 of your material if you don't have it in front of you.
Connie Ballmer,
Yes.
Peter Bragdon,
Yes.
Rudy Chapa,
Yes.
Andrew Colas, Ann Curry,
Yes.
Alan Ford, Susan Gary, Joe Gagne,
Yes.
Ross Carey,
Yes.
Chair Lillis,
Yes.
Will Postian,
Yes.
Vice Chair Ralph, Mary Wilcox,
Yes.
Kurt Wilcox.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. Thank you. Let's move on to the next item of business. There are two seconded motions coming to the board, both from the Finance Committee, and I think, Ross, do you want to just say a few words about each of the two?
The first one is a project to renovate Oregon Hall, one of the main administrative buildings on campus. This is a building that has both some extensive deferred maintenance as well as some needs to reconfigure to better utilize the space available. The cost exceeds our threshold of $5 million, which requires an approval by both the committee as well as the board. The cost is approximately $9 million. the committee approved it unanimously and recommends that it come before the board as a seconded motion. The second item is a project of $16 million, which is the renovation of Pacific Hall. It will expand the number of wet labs in the building by 14. Approximately 7 of those will be used by existing faculty on other parts of the campus, and 7 will be available for expanding the number of science faculty doing research in that facility. It is the goal of the university to predominantly fund this through donations, philanthropy, and along those lines, it's been kick-started by generous donation of the Ford family. Thank you, Alan. Again, it's $16 million, exceeds our threshold. It was approved unanimously by the Finance and Facilities Committee, and again, comes before you as a seconded motion.
The threshold is $5 million. The rest come to the board if it's $5 million. So we should do these separately. All those in favor of the $9.5 million renovation for Oregon Hall, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All those in favor of the $16.7 million renovation for Pacific Hall, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. Chairman, I think I should be reclused from that vote since I do have a conflict of interest.
You can't both pay for it and vote.
I think you get 2 votes.
That's right. Did you hear that? You get 2 votes if you pay
You
for
might
it.
have a family fight if you voted no.
That's another story.
The Ford family continues to be very generous supporters of the university. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, blushing. It's hard to get. Okay. So we're going to turn to the next subject. Some introductions of new administrators. Scott, you're going to handle this, and as all of you know, a number of new deans and AVPs and VPs have been hired recently throughout the university, and this is a chance for us all to get to meet them. Scott
So
Coltrane.
it is my pleasure to be able to introduce the new campus leaders, and I'll let you know a little bit of each one and then invite them up.
We may have to form a queue.
I started embarrassing you by saying nice things. Migrate this way. So first up, we have David Conover, who you heard from earlier. He's our new Vice President for Research and Innovation. David comes to us from Stony Brook University, where he served as the Vice President for Research. He has invaluable experience working at NSF. He was the Director of the Division of Ocean Sciences. And his hands-on experience there in D.C. will be a huge resource for us as we work to increase our sponsored research portfolio. His own scholarship is in the area of marine science. He has authored over 125 publications, received over 30 years of support from NSF, NOAA, and private foundations. We're thrilled David decided to switch coasts and join us here in Eugene. So, David.
Thank you, Scott. And all I can say is I'm really excited about being here. This is an institution with a stellar reputation in research, a member of the AAU, and I think it's the accomplishments in research that happened back in the era when things like the Institute for Molecular Biology were first established that created the reputation that enabled this university to enter the AAU. And after a recent period of what I think anyone would probably agree is a period of turbulence and instability in the institution, it's now clear that a transformation is underway. And I think it's really exciting to come here and be part of that transformation and also to help President Schill enact his vision to see us rededicate this university to the mission of research and scholarship. And so given that that's the Vice President for Research, primary responsibility is to advance that portion of the university's mission, it's a terrific opportunity to come here and be part of that. Other things, of course, that you have a new governance structure, which I think will enable this institution to be much more nimble than it has been in the past. And I think the expertise I bring, as having been a scientist that's fought in the trenches for federal research for many years, I was a dean for 7 years. I worked at NSF, as Scott mentioned, and then was a VPR at Stony Brook. So I've seen research administration from every angle that you can look at it from. So I think I bring that here, and I really am so excited about being here. Lastly, your president is a very persuasive leader. He brings the same energy to recruitment of leaders as he brings to cultivation of donors. And your provost does that quite well as well. So it became an offer it was very difficult to refuse. Now, regarding my vision, tomorrow I'm going to be giving you a presentation of our research portfolio, and at the end of that, then I'm going to I will then talk about things I want to see put into place that can help us increase the research portfolio. So I'm going to postpone that till tomorrow.
Can I just add a couple, David, I've been in a couple meetings with David. I think this is remarkable. 14 or 15 years as a principal investigator, dean of investigators, somebody who made decisions on who got funding for research. I mean, talk about circling the case. I think that breadth of experience should be very, very helpful to us. It's great to have you here.
Welcome.
Other questions for David? You'll hear from him tomorrow. Thanks, David. Next up, we have Dean Christoph Linder,
Angela,
who is Dean of the College of Architecture and Allied Arts. Christoph has made the longest trek to come here. He comes to us from the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands.
And apparently he rode his bike.
That or I was anticipating a hostile reception.
So Christoph, I think, will fit naturally into UO's interdisciplinary strengths. He's the first non-architect dean of the School of Architecture and Allied Arts. He specializes in media and cultural theory with a research focus on the relationship between globalization, cities, and creative media industries. I've already been impressed with his ability to quickly jump in and start. He was one of the most active participants in our retreat of deans and vice provosts with lots of good ideas. We are really pleased to have him. Christoph.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you very much for the opportunity to meet you and to say hello. Share with you. And the two things I'd really like to share with you is why did I move on anywhere in the world to pursue my academic career, but I wanted to be here in this institution that I work in. It is focused on research and academic excellence. It does that also with the sensitivity to the student experience. This is everything the public university should do. We would think this would happen all around the world. So I was very excited to be part of that. At this moment is a particularly exciting time because people are excited about where the university is going. They're excited about research. There are ideas flowing all over campus. So I think it's a very productive time to be here, and I think we have a lot of cause for optimism. I think the goals that we've set are ambitious, they're the right goals, but they're also entirely achievable, and I want to contribute to doing that. Within the School of Architecture and Allied Arts, we are a very diverse, eclectic institutional space. We have artists, architects, designers, art historians. We cover academic practice, professional practice, creative practice, and we are also a deeply collaborative and highly interdisciplinary school. And I'd like to build on those things, and I'd like to connect it increasingly to research, having research drive, inform, energize, and inspire all of our activities, from labs and publications to classrooms and working with students. And I'm also very interested in growing our PhD programs. And as well to furthering our international profile and impact. We are very active, like a lot of this university, all around the world. I'd like to make that more visible, more palpable, and have that shape and inform our everyday working lives a little bit more. I think the future of higher education is increasingly transnational. This is how knowledge is created and exchanged, and we need to be part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Christoph.
Thanks.
Next up, we have Dean Juan Carlos Moleda, who is Dean of our School of Journalism and Communication. Juan Carlos has 21 years of experience in teaching and research in public relations and communications, spanning 3 institutions, including Radford, University of South Carolina, and most recently in the longest period at the University of Florida. Juan Carlos has experiences that span both academic and practitioner worlds. He has served as a manager of public relations, corporate communications, and advertising promotion for a financial consortium in Venezuela, his native country. Juan Carlos is our longest-serving new administrator. He started way back in July, beginning of July, so he's been on the job. His enthusiasm and for innovative approach to SOJC already, he has lots of ideas, more ideas than I can answer, but I think this is good to keep me on my toes. We're really happy that he's joining us. Juan Carlos.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for receiving me here. This is a privilege for me to be in front of you. I came from Venezuela 22 years ago. I never thought about staying in the USA. I never thought about pursuing a PhD program. I never thought about being a professor or a researcher, and nonetheless an academic administrator in higher education administration. I am here by chance, but by chance, of course, I took very seriously my preparation and also my experiences here in the States in the last 22 years. My last institution was the University of Florida, where I spent 16 years. And then I came here, and they were so impressively aggressive in pursuing my interest in this institution. But it was not difficult for me to realize the potential of the University of Oregon and the legacy School of Journalism and Communication. It's one of the oldest programs in the USA. 100 years we celebrate this year. In addition to that, it's one of the programs in the States with the most endowed professorship. In fact, my position, the Edwin L. Arts Dean of the School of Journalism and Communication, is one of the few in the nation that is endowed. What that means, that the endowed professorships and chairs and deans, we have additional resources for us to move forward initiatives. And I think it's a great moment to be in a School of Journalism and Communication. We are facing great challenges, but also great opportunities. Especially the journalism profession and practices are facing challenges, but at the same time, we are becoming more and more central of democracy and more central of the debate of important issues that we are facing in this society. And let me give you an example. For instance, when I realized that we not only have a strong, core foundation here in Eugene, but also in Portland. And we have in Portland what is called the Agora Journalism Center. And what Agora does is to really address the important issues facing our communities or communities, and also engaging groups. So civic engagement and addressing the major challenges faced by our communities, such as homelessness, housing, violence, climate change. Students are taken to Alaska, for instance, to work with scientists and to work with community and to communicate what sciences are telling us about the impact of climate change in the lives of communities in Alaska. So there are many reasons. I can be here for many minutes or hours, who knows. But the fact is that I'm very honored to be in this position. I'm very honored that they selected me with my unique background. I think I am the first dean that have a strategic communication orientation. But at the same time, I am a dean who has a foundation in journalism. That was my first degree, my bachelor's degree in journalism, audiovisual journalism, in fact. So I'm very happy to be here, very happy to be working closely with this new leadership, with President Schill. We have had a conversation, the same with Scott, and I believe we have a future ahead of us not only impacting the life and the success of students, both at the undergraduate and graduate level, but also impacting the state and the nation in terms of really having the serious conversation about how journalism and communication can make an impact in this evolving world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juan Carlos.
Scott, could I just interrupt for 1 second and say, people have said nice things about me, but the real person who really ran these searches and landed these folks is not me, it's you. You did a tremendous job, and I'm very grateful, and I know we're all very grateful because this is your handiwork, so thank you.
Thank you. And it's remarkable. We got our top choices in all these searches, and that's phenomenal. It was a great year. We have a few more to do, and Mike will talk about them as we move forward. Danica Scott, Danica Scott, who I introduced earlier and talked a little bit about student success. She's in the process of moving her family out. They're not here yet from Minnesota, but we've wasted no time, and she's hard at work. Been here all of 2 weeks or something. Okay. Oh, okay.
I
That's
know.
a long time.
Long time.
So we're excited. Maybe you can say a few words.
Thank you again for receiving me. We talked a little bit earlier. I feel really privileged and honored to be here at the University of Oregon. It was an easy decision to actually come here. I think a lot of my history, background, and experiences have led me actually to me sitting in this chair today. So I am a first-generation college student, first in my family, and that includes extended family to actually attend college. And what I did notice when I was at home before college and at college, that there were a lot of people who disappeared. They went home, they didn't complete. So this has always been a passion of mine for students to have the opportunity to go to college, achieve an education, which is the great equalizer. And it's really important that when students come as an institution, it's our job to help them leave with a degree in hand. So what we're doing here is so important. It's a passion that I have, and it was easy to actually come, to use all the skills and talents that I have to help advance the work that we need to do here. So I talked a little bit about my vision earlier, which is we can be that place. We can eliminate barriers and help our students actually get out, and we can start doing that through some of the initiatives that we talked about earlier. So we can have a really robust advising system in a decentralized institution that we can make changes at, and we can really help our students make it to that next level. I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy to be a part of an amazing team that I couldn't have dreamed of with Lisa and Ron. So thank you again for receiving me and for this time, this additional time with you today. And thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Denise. Welcome. Chris Winter. So Chris is our new Associate Vice President for Student Life and Dean of Students. This is an enormously important role. She is here today, even though she doesn't really start work until September 19th. She is a former Duck who's been working at our sister institution, Oregon State University, since about 2005. Most recently, she served as Interim Dean of Student Life, but she's come back home to U of O, and we're glad to have her.
Thank you. In 11 days from today, I will begin my time here as the Associate Vice President and Dean of Students, and I'm so excited to return home back to my alma mater where it all began. I had a transformative experience as a student here that changed my path and shaped where I am today, and I'm excited to be a part of that for incoming students and current students as well. There are 5 focus areas that I want to look at as starting this position, rooted in some strategic focus on high-impact practices for student success. The first is to look at current barriers that our students are facing, look at removing those barriers and how we can do that. The second is responding to students in crisis. This is critical. A lot of our students are experiencing a lot of challenging things, and we need staff there that can help step in as necessary and respond in crisis. Build community among students and different student groups and student leaders. And finally, uphold accountability and integrity in our students based on the choices that they've made. I feel like being asked to share a vision with you would be unfair since I haven't started yet. And I'm a big believer in looking at culture and context of the institution before jumping ahead. I think it would be not really in my best interest to push on what I think it should be without really understanding the culture and the context. I also think in forming that vision, it's really important to look at the balance of what students need, the balance of what the staff needs, and the balance of what the institution really needs. And so part of the first focus will be really listening and hearing what those needs are from the different areas as we look to how we want to best move forward in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think it's great that she comes to us from Oregon State. In my dealings with parallel positions there, they have been very good at centralized planning for both student services, some of their online courses. They just are a real model for us. So we look forward to you bringing some of that expertise.
I look forward to being back in green.
The next two people I want to introduce in absentia. We have recently hired them, but they have not yet started. The first is Brett Harris, our new ombudsperson. She will be making her transition to campus and will be starting as the UO's new ombudsperson. It says in August, I don't think so, but sometime in September. She's expected to be fully settled in her new home. There's a new ombuds office. It's one of the houses right behind the child care center over by the law school on East 17th, right between Moss and Agate. So it's nice. We decided that would be an appropriate location for the ombuds office. This is a place where people don't want to be seen going or coming from there. So it's a little bit out of the way, but it's its own place, and it's worked out great. We have had an interim ombudsperson, Jennifer Reynolds. Did you hear from Jennifer? I don't think did she give a presentation?
Yeah,
no. She did. She did a great job and just helped us out a lot. She's returning as faculty director to her role as director of the Appropriate Dispute Resolution Center at the University of Oregon. So Brett will be serving as an advocate for fairness and healthy campus conflict resolution. She will oversee a program that offers all members of the campus community a central, safe, and easy place to gain access to support and problem-solving resources. She earned her bachelor's degree from Idaho State University and a law degree from the University of Idaho. Her emphasis was on Native American law, which led her to studies in alternative dispute resolution, including basic and advanced mediation training through the Northwest Institute for Dispute Resolution. She's coming to the University of Oregon from the University of Mississippi. And prior to Ole Miss, she worked for nearly 3 years as a mediation program coordinator for Idaho's 7th Judicial District. She concurrently ran a private dispute resolution practice and was listed on the Idaho Supreme Court roster of court-approved mediators. So our Ombuds program was established in 2014, and it provides an impartial dispute resolution. Practitioners offer both confidential and informal assessment to university students, staff, faculty, and administrators. You'll remember that we recently enacted changes to make that a confidential reporter. So we're looking very forward to welcoming Brett Harris. Finally, we have a new UO Chief of Police. You might have seen in the paper. Matt Carmichael will assume leadership of the University of Oregon Police Department as Chief of Police on September 12th. Matt comes to us from the University of California at Davis, where he served as Chief of Police since 2011. He has more than 30 years' experience in law enforcement. In 1985, he became an officer in the police department in the city of Pinole, California. He reached the rank of detective sergeant. He joined UC Davis's police department as a lieutenant in 2002, and he had oversight of police operations on the Davis and Sacramento campuses, the medical schools in Sacramento. So it's actually a much bigger profile, larger undergraduate institution, larger graduate programs, and a medical school that he was chief of police for the whole 9 yards. He led the police department since 2011, introducing numerous reforms and initiatives to bring the department and campus closer together, including a student advisory council, an independent police accountability board, a departmental outreach unit, and a global liaison. And he was able to build closer links with international students, had lots of ideas for internships and bringing students into the work of the police department. He was the first, he created this first student cadet program in the West Coast at any rate. So we're really happy to get Matt. He is moving his family here. Part of it for him was a transition, in the same way that we're able to recruit faculty and administrators at the right time in their lives where they want to challenge, really excited about the new structure of the police department and empowering them to be a full-on police department. So we're really happy to have him. That's it. And
Thanks,
stay tuned for the next ones that are coming after this year. Thank you.
What a busy season for you.
Yeah, you're not slacking off on the way out, are you?
Okay, next, the President's report. Are you ready, Michael?
I am. So I have 4 topics that I wanted to talk with you about today, or just briefly describe progress. First is about our building of leadership at the university, which Scott has already introduced you to a number of them. Our campaign, the progress we're making, our work on the other demands of the Black Student Task Force, and then our current state budget situation. So why don't we start with leadership? So as you all know, the past, and as you just heard, this has really been an enormously busy year for the university in terms of changing much of the leadership of the university. I'll just recount some of the appointments that have occurred over the past 12 months. So Kevin Reed became our general counsel and vice president. Kyle Henley became our vice president of communications and marketing. David Conover became our vice president for research and innovation. Juan Carlos Moleda became the dean of the School of Journalism. Christoph Linder, who you just met, also dean of the School of Allied Arts and Architecture. Andrew Marcus, who's been here for a long time, was made the permanent dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. Greg Stripp, Melanie Munzer have joined, Greg has been here for a long time, but each one of them is now become chief of staff. Greg, chief of staff for my office, and Melanie, chief of staff for the provost. And, you know, as one of the 2 people that has benefited from both of them, actually, and I know I'm speaking for Scott, we wouldn't be able to do our work without them. They are they're the people that organize us. They're the people that help us identify and keep to our agendas, and then help us execute on those agendas. Also, Lisa Frankel, who gave a presentation today, has become Dean of Undergraduate Studies. So this is a lot of, when you think about it, I've been recently had the occasion to just do a little bit of thinking, which I only give myself this much in any period of time. This university has really undergone just a huge amount of change in a very short period of time. You're all new, right? Our whole structure is new, and then most of the leadership faces are new, and more is coming. So it's really lots of things have changed here, and again, I don't have the long view here, but I hope that you're liking the changes, and certainly it feels good from where I'm sitting. We will be moving forward with some additional changes this year. One is Dean of the Law School. Michael Moffat, as all of you know, has announced that at the end of this school year he's going to be stepping down. We are looking for a Dean of the Lenquist School of Business. We are right in the process right now of that. And then, as all of you know, Scott has announced that at the end of this academic year he is going to be stepping down as provost. Now, I want to first obviously thank Michael and Scott for doing such wonderful jobs for the university. They have been, in both of them, in difficult situations. This is not an easy time to have been dean of a law school, believe me. And as all of you know very clearly, it's not been an easy time to be provost or acting president, interim president for the University of Oregon. And, you know, we all owe them a tremendous debt of gratitude. We'll keep saying this over and over again until we celebrate it toward the end of the year. But I just want to thank them both very much. Look to the future, and so what we need to do is commence those searches. So let me tell you where we are. The business school is moving ahead most quickly. As many of you know, we did a first round of searching last spring. We did not ultimately hire a dean. Over the summer, we built a pool up. We'll be interviewing imminently. And I have to say, the pool is very, very strong right now, and so we're very, very excited about it. I want to thank Bruce Blonigan, who actually is also gets credit for being a new leader since he stepped in as the interim or the acting, I forget exactly what we're calling it, dean of the business school, and he also is serving as chair of the search committee, so he hasn't stopped doing that, and so he is really working very effectively with the committee. And hopefully we'll have some good news on the deanship by the next time we have a board meeting. And our hope would be, in the most ambitious schedule, would be to have someone on board in January. The law school dean and the provost search committees, they have been selected. Dan Titchener is chairing the law committee. Jerry Richmond is chairing the provost committee. The search firms are being contracted as we speak. The job descriptions are being written. One of the committees will be charged on Monday, and so we're off to the races with that. We anticipate naming the new dean and the new provost in late winter or early spring, so we're moving forward on that. Also, lastly, on leadership, we are, as you heard earlier, we're hiring a new Chief Information Officer. Mike Andresen is chairing that committee. The committee's assembled, and we hope to identify the candidates and then actually the holder of the person who's going to be in that position by the December board meeting. All right, so let me turn now to the Black Student Task Force, and then at the end I'll just take any questions you have. So we've already today done the first it sounds like a pun to say we've done, but the Dunn de-naming occurred earlier today. That was one of their demands. We have previously announced that we were moving forward on 6 additional demands of the Black Student Task Force. They're currently underway. The first is expanding our efforts to attract African American students to the university. Enrollment management is hiring staff and executing to recruit African American students through a new African American Opportunities Program. We have invited 6 Black letter Greek organizations, Black Greek letter organizations to the University of Oregon. That we've done. We're creating an African American residential student community. It's going to be called the Umoja Pan-African Scholars Academic Residential Community. It's going to be launched this fall. It will accommodate 25 students. It's going to be in the Living Learning Center. And we're also creating new African American advisory boards for retention and advising. And that's been added to the Multicultural Students Leadership Team. We've created a new African American lecture series that will begin with an implicit bias workshop on September 23rd. And we've also established a new home for publishing diversity data on the Division of Equity and Inclusion's website. So those are the things that we've already executed. That leaves 5 additional demands. One is a Black Student Leadership Task Force. So what we are doing is we're working with the Black Student Task Force and an alumni and faculty staff leadership group to create both alumni and staff leadership, as well as faculty. We're going to host a group of Black alumni at the university on September 23rd, and they're going to work with the Black Student Task Force to come up with ideas about how we can create these groups. And our Division of Equity and Inclusion is going to create and support a Black strategy group for employees. We have one of these for Native Americans. We have another one for Latino and Asian communities. So we're going to be moving forward with that and coordinating those leadership groups. Another demand of the Black Student Task Force was for a Black Cultural Center. We had a committee which has researched other campuses. They've taken a trip over to OSU, which has a number of these cultural centers, and they have recommended that we start fundraising to construct a brand new building on the corner of East 15th Avenue and Villard for a Black Culture Center. We've reserved the land. We own it. I think a house is on it right now, and we're reserving it for that purpose. We're examining the feasibility of raising up to $3 million to build the building, and then additional resources to program the building and to staff it. And what we want is to come up with an idea that is innovative and exciting with respect to not just what the building looks like, but what's going on inside the building. So assuming we can raise the money, assuming we can develop a plan in concert with our students, then I'm hoping that I'll be in a position to approve this project later on this quarter. So another demand was student scholarships. Now, as you might imagine, I strongly support efforts to raise private funds and philanthropy for scholarships and grants that can be used to increase the diversity at the University of Oregon. So we're right now researching various options for how we might administer this program. Kevin is getting a legal opinion for how the Supreme Court decision in the Fisher case, how that might affect us, and what things are permissible, what things aren't permissible under the current state of constitutional law. So more on that as we move forward. African American hiring, faculty hiring. We are in the process of moving forward. This is something that I've said over and over again. We need to increase our minority recruiting and mentoring programs. We need to both increase our level of activity and then our success in hiring. So one of the things that I'm excited about, this has not been announced, but we are going to create a new cluster for hiring faculty with expertise in the area of Black and African or Black African American literature, history, and women's and gender studies. So this will be a new cluster. At the moment, we're going to be funding it internally. Obviously, we would love to get philanthropy to help us fund this. It's going to be primarily centered in Cass. We're also asking our various schools and departments to recruit hard for African American faculty, and what we're doing is we are asking them for plans about what they're doing, what they're planning to do for diversity with regard to hiring in the future, and we've announced to our deans that they will be evaluated in part upon how much effort they put in and what their level of success is going to be. We're also going to establish a pre-doc program, which is in partnership with historically Black colleges and predominantly Black institutions to try to increase our pipeline of faculty to the University of Oregon. And lastly, what we're going to do is increase implicit bias training in each of our search committees. We're going to try to roll that out as much as possible so people can think about, as they're hiring, what their biases might be and how they might overcome those biases. Curriculum reform. All right, so one of the things that the Black Student Task Force asked, as you might remember, that Ethnic Studies 101 be offered for all of our students. That quickly was understood not to be a successful idea. because we actually have 21,000 students and I think 4 professors and 5 professors in ethnic studies, and so they would all be doing that morning, noon, and night. So it led to a broader conversation about what we can do in our curriculum and to increase our offerings in this area. Now, part of that will hopefully be taken care of through this cluster hiring initiative. In addition, we're going to work with the Senate to undertake a review and a revision of our current multicultural requirements, which, as you know, every student is supposed to take, I think, 2 courses in multicultural. Unfortunately, that list of courses has grown to be multi-everything, and I think there's like 800 courses, and so it's not focused. Certainly, you could graduate here without a full understanding of African Americans and their experience in the United States, and that's something that we don't think should happen. And so we're going to be working with the Senate on that. Lisa is predominantly the person who is taking that oar. So this is going to be, obviously, because it's a curriculum issue, this is going to take some time to work through. We're estimating, it's about 1 year to 2 years of work before we get this exactly right and implemented. Lastly, I know this is a long list, but there's 13 different demands. The students asked for African American or people who had sensitivity to the needs of African Americans to serve as advising and retention specialists. So right now what we're doing is we're trying to figure out where we can find additional FTE in advising to hire people with a deep knowledge and commitment to retention and ensuring the success of African American students. We're currently looking for an advisor. We will be looking for an advisor in the Teaching Learning Center. That hiring cycle is going to be in the winter and spring, and obviously one of the things we're going to be looking for is someone who will have sensitivity and commitment to African American students. We're also going to explore, there's a vacancy that is developed, actually sadly because the person in that role was very good, at the business school. And what we're going to do is we're going to obviously be looking to hire somebody, again, with sensitivity to the needs and aspirations of our African American students. As you may know or may not know, when you go into one of these searches, you're not, under the law, you can't say we're going to hire an African American person for this role. But we can do searches which look for people with experience in that among those people and students. And so I think that will be something that we will look forward to doing. We're going to be meeting when the students come back. We're going to meet with them to discuss our progress, most of the things I've just discussed with you, and also to move forward with the discussion of D.D. Hall and how we will move to a resolution there. Fundraising campaign. Okay, all you know, we just passed our $1 billion mark, and we're on to the second billion. So far, we have raised $1.05 billion over the past 6 years. Our totals have been $107 million, $110 million, $200 million, $115 million. That was a bad year. I think that was the year probably when there were multiple presidents. 215 bill. These are millions. I'm sorry, not billions. I wish. So 107, 110, 200, 115, 215, and last year we were $202 million. We had a record number of gift solicitations and major gift closes in the last year. We're not resting. I know. There's Mike. Mike, you shouldn't be resting. You shouldn't be sitting. You should be jogging in place. So Mike is continuing to raise the bar higher and higher, and Scott and I are working with our deans and directors to really encourage them to fundraise. I'm going to be spending a lot of my time with them and talking about fundraising. We've already had one meeting with them. So far in this year, first quarter, so far we've raised more than $23 million. We typically do about $26 million in the first quarter, and it's not over yet. So, we're on track. If you look back at fiscal year 16, one of the things I'm really pleased about is 80% of our giving was for academic purposes. That is very different from what it has typically been and what the campaign overall, the overall percentage academic in the campaign is 60%, so it's well above that. Almost 35% of the gift total is earmarked for an endowment. 25% is for planned or deferred gifts. 80,000 donors have made gifts. We've received 315,000 gifts in the campaign. So pretty impressive. Now, last topic. It seems like I'm talking a long time. Current budget situation. Okay, this is this year. And for those of you who read the paper intently, you'll know that this is a year of much greater budget uncertainty concerning particularly our state budget allocation. We receive 6% of our funds from the state. In our E&G budget, it's what, 12%? Even though it's only 12%, and I'm always supposed to say we're grateful, that 12% is actually really important. It's about $64 million, and it's hard to come by $64 million. But this year, there's a lot of uncertainty. The state, as many of you know, is forecasting a budget deficit of at least $1.2 billion if everything stayed the same. And you may have seen the Medicaid thing show up in the paper yesterday as, being a huge, they were going to be requiring a huge additional amount of money. So we start with a budget deficit of $1.2 billion, and then we have Measure 97 on the ballot. And I want to be very clear, I'm not taking any position with regard to Measure 97. I don't even know, even if you were to catch me and give me truth serum, I wouldn't be able to tell you what I was going to vote on Measure 97. But it's on the ballot this year. It would generate, if it is enacted, about $3 billion in revenue. An additional bit of uncertainty is, well, it's actually not that uncertain, is PERS, but it creates additional problems, as all of you have heard over and over again. PERS, which the unfunded portion of PERS is creating a nightmare for all public institutions in the state. For us, it's going to add $6 million of expense every biennium for the next 3. So that will ultimately, and this is recurring, so that means 6, 12, 18 million to our bottom line for our expenses. So obviously all of this really complicates our budget plans. When we all get together in March, we could be experiencing, when you set tuition, we could have in the offing major budget cuts from the state that could translate into our asking you to approve tuition increases of double digits and not small double digits. Or we could end up in a situation where the increases will be less than 5% and additional money will be available for faculty growth and scholarships. Unfortunately, your guess on this is as good as mine. We're actively working with other presidents, the presidents of our sister schools. All of the presidents have recently formed an organization called the President's Council. We lobby together. We now have hired a professional staff. We're hopefully going to work with Quinn, with you guys, and with our labor unions and our faculty to impress upon the legislature the importance of higher education, particularly in a cut scenario. And if we are in that world, because as we all know, the history of higher education in this state is we don't just take a proportionate share of cuts. That would be awful. just to be proportional. But we get it disproportional, which is doubly awful. And so we want to we want to do everything that we can to avoid that. Hans, Libby, and our government affairs people are very much on this. I've spent a lot of time in Salem. We'll be spending a lot more time in Salem, which, you know, for anybody who knows Oregon knows is the garden spot of the state. And so very excited to do that. Now, on that cheery note, and probably not temperate note, I'm happy to answer any questions about anything. This either on my report or not in my report.
But probably on your report.
That'd be better.
Or something that was otherwise publicly noticed.
Yes. I guess. The imports are.
Ask what you've been doing.
Right. It's been busy. It's really been, summer's been busy. So that's just this stuff.
Any questions for Mike?
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael.